The morning Marcus Chen discovered his pool gate hanging open. Again, he stood on his back patio with a cold coffee and a slowly building rage. Not the explosive kind. The quiet, accumulative kind that sits behind your ribs like a second heartbeat. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Saturday in June, and he could already see the evidence. Wet footprints leading from the gate to the deep end, a pink inflatable donut half submerged near the drain, and the distinct smell of coconut sunscreen mixing with chlorine in a way that made his stomach turn. "God damn it," he muttered, setting down his mug on the weathered Adirondack chair. The problem had started 3 weeks earlier, back in late May, when Jennifer Hartwell, the HOA president who lived 2 houses down in the identical Mediterranean-style colonial, had approached him at the neighborhood block party. She'd been holding a plastic cup of wine in one hand and her daughter's hand in the other, a perfect picture of suburban contentment that made Marcus's jaw clench even then. "Marcus, hi, we've been meaning to talk to you," she'd said, her smile wide and practiced. "Your pool is so gorgeous. The kids in the neighborhood talk about it all the time. It would be so wonderful for community building if maybe, just occasionally, you could let the kids use it during the hot days. We're all neighbors here after all." He'd been caught off guard. They'd only lived in Willowbrook Estates for 2 years, and he and Jennifer had never been close. She'd knocked on his door exactly once last summer to tell him his grass was a 1/4 inch too long according to HOA bylaws. Now she wanted access to his pool. Marcus had been polite. He was always polite. "I appreciate you asking, Jen, but my insurance only covers my family and invited guests. Liability is." "Oh, insurance," she'd waved a dismissive hand. "You're being so legalistic about it. This is exactly the kind of thing that builds community. We do yoga together on Tuesday mornings, you know, very spiritual. I'd love for the kids to have that same sense of belonging." She hadn't waited for his answer before drifting away to talk to someone else, as if the conversation was already settled. The first time he'd found the gate open, he'd assumed it was an accident. His teenage son, Marcus Jr., was home from college that week. He'd mentioned it at dinner. "Dad, some kids were in the pool earlier. I told them to leave." Marcus had changed his gate code and put up a small sign, "Private pool, authorized users only." The gate had opened again 3 days later. Then again. Then 3 more times in the span of a week. Each time he'd found evidence of trespassing, wet marks on the stone steps, a child's swim goggle abandoned by the pump room, a McDonald's wrapper floating in the deep end, a hairclip in the drain basket. Once, someone had left a pair of sodden flip-flops on his lounge chair, as if the pool area was a shared community facility. Marcus had walked down to Jennifer's house on a Wednesday evening, still trying to handle it diplomatically. Her husband, Derek, answered the door. Derek was the kind of guy who was friendly but distant, a corporate type who was rarely home, always at the office or at his country club. He'd been cordial about the pool situation. "Oh man, I'll talk to Jen about it. The kids probably just, you know how it is. They think everything in the neighborhood is communal." Nothing had changed. The next week, Marcus had installed a more sophisticated locking mechanism on his gate, a smart lock that required a code he changed every few days. He'd thought that would solve it. He was wrong. He'd come home one afternoon to find 14-year-old Sophie Hartwell standing on his patio, soaking wet, next to his opened gate. Standing next to her was a man Marcus didn't recognize. "Oh, hi, Mr. Chen," Sophie had said brightly, as if running through someone's backyard was a normal, friendly activity. "Dad said I could ask you directly if it was okay to go swimming. He's been helping us install a fence. He's our contractor." The contractor had looked embarrassed. Marcus had felt his blood pressure spike. "Sophie, no, your father knows it's not okay. Please leave the pool area." "You're so mean," Sophie had shot back, and the words had stung more than they should have, which made Marcus even angrier at himself for letting them sting. That night he'd sent Jennifer a text. "Jennifer, I need this to stop. The pool is not available for neighborhood use. I've asked multiple times. Please speak to your children and respect my property." Her response had come within minutes. "Wow, really going out of your way to build walls between neighbors. That's not what our community is about." Marcus had read it 3 times, each reading making him feel more like the villain in his own story. Now standing on his patio at 6:47 a.m. on a Saturday, staring at the evidence of another intrusion, he felt the dam inside him beginning to crack. He wasn't an unreasonable man. He paid his HOA fees. He maintained his lawn within the exact specifications. He'd never complained about the Johnsons' roof color or the Patels' extended driveway. He simply wanted his own property, the one thing he'd paid for completely, owned completely, maintained completely, to remain private. The pink inflatable floated innocently in the deep end. Marcus pulled out his phone and took photographs, the wet footprints, the donut, the disturbed deck furniture. Then he sent them to Jennifer with a message. This is the 5th time this month. I've been patient. I've tried asking nicely. This ends today. If it happens again, I will pursue legal action and file a complaint with the HOA board. Her response came 40 minutes later. That's very threatening. I expected better from someone in our community. By the way, Derek mentioned you've been having some issues with your sprinkler system. I hope that gets resolved soon. There was something in that last sentence, something underneath it, a quiet threat. Marcus didn't know what she was implying, but the tone made his skin prickle. He'd had to replace his sprinkler system the previous month after it had apparently malfunctioned. It had cost him nearly $4,000. He'd assumed it was just a breakdown, one of those expensive home ownership surprises. But the way she'd mentioned it, the timing of it, the slight smile in those words, it made him wonder. He tried to push the thought away. That was paranoid. That was him being unreasonable. But then the intrusion stopped. For exactly 1 week, the gate remained closed. The pool deck stayed empty. Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly, to think that perhaps Jennifer had finally gotten the message, that his stern text had finally created consequences she couldn't ignore. Then, the following Saturday, he woke to the sound of children laughing. Not just children, a whole group of them. He threw on shorts and went downstairs, moving through his house like it was on fire, his heart pounding with an anger that felt almost primal. When he reached his back door, he stopped dead. There were at least 20 people in his pool, 20, across the water on the deck in the shallow end. Adults too, neighbors he recognized, and some he didn't. A cooler sat next to his patio table. Someone had set up a portable speaker. Music was playing. Someone was grilling something on the decorative side table he used for plants. In the center of it all, floating on a raft in the deep end like Cleopatra on the Nile, was Jennifer Hartwell. She was wearing an expensive-looking one-piece swimsuit in bright turquoise, sunglasses perched on her head, holding what looked like a mojito in a glass with a real lime. When she saw Marcus, she smiled and waved. "Marcus, you're home. Perfect. Come join us. We're having a pool party. It's for the Neighborhood Association's summer kickoff. We figured since you have the best pool, you wouldn't mind hosting." For a long moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He couldn't process what he was seeing. Derek stood on the deck near the grill, holding tongs. He looked almost apologetic. The Johnsons were in the shallow end. The Patels, too. The Chen's own neighbors on both sides. "You need to leave," Marcus said quietly. "All of you now." "Oh, come on," Jennifer called from the raft, her tone suggesting he was being theatrical. "Don't be like that. This is what community is. This is what neighbors do for each other." "I don't care," Marcus said, and he was surprised by how steady his voice was. "This is my property. I've asked you repeatedly to stop trespassing. This is trespassing on a massive scale. Everyone needs to get out of my pool, off my property now." Someone turned down the music. "Well," Jennifer said, sitting up on the raft, her tone shifting to something harder. "I guess we'll just have to tell the HOA board about your refusal to participate in neighborhood events. That's actually a violation of the community spirit clause in the bylaws. You might want to reconsider your attitude." "The community spirit clause doesn't require me to host a party in my home," Marcus said. "What it does require is that you respect private property. That's in the actual written bylaws I can have read to you." "You know what?" Jennifer stood up on the raft, a dangerous move given how small it was. "I think this is coming from a place of racism. I think you don't want the diversity in this neighborhood using your pool." The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Marcus felt Derek wince. He saw the Johnsons exchange a look. The Patels, who were Indian American, looked horrified. "That is not fair," the Patel father said, climbing out of the pool. "That is not true. Mira, come, we are leaving." Others began to follow, not all of them, but enough. The moment had broken. The picnic feeling had shattered. But Jennifer remained standing on her raft, her expression defiant. Derek was looking away from everyone, studying the grill like it held the secrets of the universe. "You can't call me a racist for enforcing my property rights." Marcus said, and the control in his voice was tissue-thin now. I can say whatever I want, Jennifer replied. And so can everyone else. How do you think that's going to sound? The guy in the neighborhood who doesn't want anyone from the other parts of town. That's not what this is. Using his precious pool, that sounds pretty bad to me. Over the next 3 hours, the party dispersed. By the time it was completely over, the damage was deeper than Marcus could have imagined. Rumors had already started spreading through the neighborhood's social media groups. His neighborhood, the one place he'd felt safe, was suddenly hostile territory. He found comments on the Willowbrook Estate's Facebook page. Some people just want their little kingdoms and wow, interesting reaction to being asked to be part of community, and that's giving major exclusionist energy. His son called him that evening. Dad, people at the gym are talking about your pool situation. Apparently you're being racist about it. That's not cool, man. That's not what happened, Marcus said, exhausted. Your mother and I talked about private property. We talked about liability. It has nothing to do with. I know, Dad, I know, but that's what people are saying. The next day, Marcus received an official letter from the HOA board. It was addressed to him, stamped with an official seal, and written in the kind of corporate language that made his stomach drop. Dear Mr. Chen, the HOA board has received multiple complaints regarding your conduct and your refusal to participate in community-building activities. We have concerns about the divisive atmosphere you are creating in what should be a unified neighborhood. While we respect property rights, we also expect residents to engage in good faith with their neighbors and participate in the shared vision of Willowbrook Estates as an inclusive, welcoming community. Your sprinkler system violation from last month, combined with this recent incident, suggests a pattern of behavior that is not in line with our community standards. We are requesting a meeting with you to discuss these concerns and your place in our neighborhood. The board has also received concerns regarding your pool's chlorine levels and whether they meet local safety regulations. We will be conducting an inspection. Sincerely, Jennifer Hartwell, HOA President. Marcus read the letter 3 times. The chlorine claim was absurd. He had the pool professionally maintained. But that didn't matter. The letter was a weapon, and Jennifer had just fired it. He called his lawyer the next morning. His lawyer, Richard, was a sharp-eyed man in his 60s who'd handled the purchase of Marcus's home. He read the letter in silence, then looked up at Marcus over his reading glasses. This is a scare tactic, Richard said. The chlorine thing is nonsensical. The sprinkler system issue is none of their business. That's a private matter with a contractor. The community spirit clause is vague and essentially unenforceable for something like refusing to host a party. But here's what they're doing. They're creating a file, a record. They're building a narrative that you're difficult, resistant to the community, possibly discriminatory. So what do I do? Marcus asked. We send a cease and desist letter regarding the trespassing, backed by the police and the definition of property boundaries. We make it clear that any further intrusions will result in a police report and potential prosecution. We also document everything, all the times they entered without permission, all the damage, all of this. Richard tapped the HOA letter. We're going to make sure there's an official record that you've been more than reasonable and that they've been harassing you. Marcus nodded, numb. But Marcus, Richard continued, I'm going to be honest with you. You're in a smaller community where reputation matters. Even if we win this legally, you're still going to live next to these people. You need to think about whether you want to burn down the neighborhood to make a point. That was the question that kept Marcus up at night. His wife, Linda, had other concerns. I don't like her, Linda said, sitting on the edge of their bed at midnight, unable to sleep. I never liked her, but calling you a racist for having a private pool, that's not just unfair, that's dangerous. She's trying to make me the villain, Marcus said. And it's working, Linda said quietly. I saw the posts on Facebook. People are choosing to believe her version. The next week was difficult. Marcus went to the grocery store and felt a slight chill in people's acknowledgement. He saw Jennifer at the mailbox. She was outside with her kids, and she smiled at him with the confidence of someone who knew they'd already won. That's when Marcus made a decision. He was tired of being reasonable. He was tired of trying to be the bigger person. He was tired of being gaslit into thinking that wanting privacy on his own property was somehow morally wrong. He called Richard back. I want to move forward with the cease and desist, he said. No more nice, no more negotiation, full legal pressure. There was a moment of silence on the phone. Okay, Richard said. That's your choice. But I want you to understand this is going to escalate things. She's clearly not done, and going after her legally is going to make her feel threatened. Threatened people don't always make smart decisions. I don't care anymore, Marcus said. But he should have cared. He should have listened to that warning in Richard's voice, that slight hesitation that suggested he knew something about human nature that Marcus, in his anger, had forgotten. The cease and desist was delivered on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus watched from his office window as the lawyer's messenger handed the envelope to Derek, who came to the door looking confused. That evening, Jennifer showed up on Marcus's front doorstep. She was alone, which was somehow more unsettling than if she'd brought the whole neighborhood with her. She looked angry, but underneath it, there was something else, something that looked almost like fear. "You want to play hardball?" she said, not waiting for him to even open the door fully. "You want to actually start legal proceedings against me, the HOA president in your own neighborhood?" "I want you to stop trespassing on my property," Marcus said. "The letter is clear." "Do you know what you've done?" Jennifer's voice was rising. "Do you have any idea how much power you just handed me? I can have that board do anything I want now. I can increase your HOA fees. I can say your lawn isn't compliant. I can make your life hell." For a moment, Marcus felt fear, real fear, but he pushed it down. "Then do it," he said, "and I'll sue the HOA for harassment." Jennifer stared at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something crack in her facade. She looked almost frightened, of him, of the situation, of what might happen next. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly, and she left. Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. He'd crossed a line. There was no going back now. He didn't know that the real escalation was just beginning. He didn't know that Jennifer was the kind of person who fought dirty when cornered, or that she had resources and connections he couldn't imagine. He didn't know that things were about to get much, much worse before they got better. Jennifer Hartwell didn't sleep that Thursday night. Derek found her at 3 a.m. in his home office, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. She was posting on neighborhood forums, community groups, the local Facebook page, a coordinated campaign of comments and complaints about Marcus Chen that made Derek's stomach turn. "Has anyone else noticed his sprinkler system? It's been water damaged several times. Wonder if he's doing something unsafe. My son was in his pool once and came out with a rash. Just saying, safety standards matter." The way he talked to the kids was genuinely cruel. "I'm concerned about the message we're sending by tolerating that behavior." They weren't lies, exactly. They were implications and half-truths and selective narratives that, when strung together, painted a picture of Marcus as unstable, potentially dangerous, and definitely not the kind of neighbor you wanted in your community. Derek sat on the edge of the desk, watching his wife work with a mixture of concern and resignation. This was who Jennifer was under pressure, not a yoga instructor and community volunteer, but a strategist, a fighter. Someone who could convince herself that anything was justified if it served her larger narrative about who was right and who was wrong. "Jen," he said quietly, "this is going too far." "Is it?" She didn't look up from the screen. "He literally sent me a legal threat, Derek. Do you understand what that means? It means he doesn't respect me. It means he thinks I'm stupid enough to be intimidated by a lawyer's letter. Well, I'm not, and I'm not going to let him destroy my reputation in this neighborhood." "Your reputation was fine until you tried to—" "What? Until I tried to build community, until I tried to include people who felt left out." "There it is," Derek said, and there was sadness in his voice. "That's the story you're telling yourself, that this is about inclusivity, not about boundaries." Jennifer finally looked at him, and her eyes were hard. "You don't get to judge me right now. You're the one who encouraged Sophie to ask him about the pool. This is partially your fault." It was unfair, but Derek didn't argue. Arguing never worked with Jennifer when she was like this. She had the ability to retroactively rewrite history, to convince herself that her version of events was the only true version. It was one of the things he'd loved about her when they were younger, her conviction, her ability to believe so deeply in her own worldview. Now it just exhausted him. He went back to bed alone. By Friday morning, the narrative had taken hold. Marcus didn't know it yet, but his reputation in Willowbrook Estates had shifted overnight. Where there had been neutral neighbors before, now there was suspicion. Where there had been simple disagreement, now there was something darker, the sense that something was fundamentally wrong with him. The HOA board, emboldened by Jennifer's social media campaign, moved quickly. They scheduled an inspection of his property. They issued a notice that his fence line might be 6 inches over the designated boundary. It wasn't. Marcus had the original survey, but the accusations would have to be addressed. They requested copies of all his pool maintenance records. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Marcus received a call from Richard on Friday afternoon. "We have a problem," his lawyer said. "The HOA is claiming they found chlorine levels in your pool that exceed the county's safety standards. They've documented it officially, and they've reported it to the county health department." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "I have someone maintain it twice a week. The levels are always perfect." "I know, but here's the thing. They hired their own inspector, a guy who works independently. He came by yesterday morning while you were at work and tested the water. He says the levels are dangerously high." "They can't just inspect my pool without permission," Marcus said. "Actually," Richard said carefully, "they can. The HOA bylaws give them the right to inspect properties for safety violations. And now that they've documented what they claim is a violation, the county's going to get involved. The county doesn't take pool safety lightly." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "So what do we do?" "We hire our own inspector. We document the actual levels. We create a counter-report. But Marcus, this is going to cost money, and it's going to take time. Meanwhile, you might not be able to use your pool, and if the HOA decides to really press the issue, they could fine you." That weekend, Marcus had his own inspector come out. His levels were, as he knew they would be, perfect. But when his inspector tried to compare notes with the HOA's inspector, the man refused to meet with him or discuss his findings. It was obvious they were working from a predetermined conclusion. The HOA's next move came via a certified letter. Marcus was in violation of community standards. His pool was a health hazard. He needed to drain it and perform a complete system cleaning within 2 weeks, and the work had to be verified by an HOA-approved contractor. The list of HOA-approved contractors was, coincidentally, very short, and coincidentally they were all expensive. Marcus called Richard again. "This is harassment," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "This is clearly designed to punish me for the cease and desist." "I know," Richard said, "and we're going to fight it, but fighting it is going to be expensive. What I'm concerned about is what comes next. She's made the first move, now she's going to keep pushing. That's how these things work." Richard was right. The next move came on Monday. The HOA announced a special meeting to discuss pool safety standards and community liability. The email, which went out to all residents, was clearly designed to look official and authoritative, but the subtext was obvious. They were building a case against Marcus. Then came the rumors, real rumors now, spreading through the neighborhood like fire. There were whispers about the pool being contaminated and questions about whether the Chens had been negligent with maintenance. Someone started a thread on Nextdoor about pool safety, with thinly veiled references to Marcus's situation. A parent suggested that swimming in his pool might be dangerous and that everyone should think twice before letting their kids go near it. Marcus's phone started ringing with angry calls from neighbors he'd never had problems with before. "My daughter has a rash," one mother said. "Is it from your pool?" We don't know, but I don't think." "I'm reporting you to the health department," she said and hung up. Another call. "My son said your pool water looks cloudy. Isn't that a sign of bacteria?" Marcus tried to explain that the light was hitting the water at an angle, that the pool was perfectly maintained, but people didn't want to hear it. They wanted to hear a story that made them feel justified in their anger, and Jennifer had written a very compelling story. By Wednesday, Marcus noticed that his neighbors, the ones he'd been friendly with, had stopped waving. The Johnsons avoided eye contact at the mailbox. The Patels pretended not to see him when he walked by. Jennifer had done something that was almost genius in its cruelty. She'd made Marcus's own neighborhood turn against him. She'd done it by telling a story that, while not true, was just plausible enough that people could believe it. And humans, Marcus was learning, would rather believe a story that makes their fear justified than have to question their beliefs. That Thursday, Linda confronted him in their kitchen. "I want to move," she said. She wasn't angry, she was just tired, defeated. "I can't keep living like this. Everyone thinks we're the bad guys, everything is suspicious now, everyone's judging us. We didn't do anything wrong, Marcus said. I know, but that doesn't matter anymore. The story that Jennifer's telling is more powerful than the truth, at least for right now. Marcus wanted to argue with her, but he couldn't. He knew she was right. Truth was supposed to matter, but it didn't always win. Sometimes narrative won. Sometimes a person with enough confidence, enough connections, enough willingness to bend the facts could reshape entire realities. He called Richard again. I want to know what legal options we have, he said. Defamation, harassment, whatever we can use. Marcus, I'm going to be honest with you, Richard said. Legally, you're in a tough spot. She hasn't made any direct statements that you can point to as defamatory. Everything she's done is technically within her powers as HOA president. The inspection was legitimate even if the results were questionable. The meeting is legitimate. The enforcement of bylaws is legitimate. You can't sue someone for doing their job, even if you believe they're doing it with malicious intent. So I'm just supposed to sit here and let her destroy my reputation. No, Richard said. There might be another way, but it's not pretty, and I need to warn you before we go down this path. If you escalate further, she will too. This is the point where you need to really think about whether you want to keep fighting or whether you want to find a way to make peace. But Marcus didn't want to make peace. He wanted justice. He wanted Jennifer to feel what he was feeling, the sense of injustice, the violation of having his privacy invaded, his reputation questioned, his good faith repeatedly ignored. Tell me the options, he said. We can file a complaint with the state's real estate licensing board regarding her conduct as a contractor. She's not a contractor. Right, we can sue the HOA for harassment and abuse of power. But that means filing a lawsuit in civil court, which means depositions, discovery, potentially, this all becoming very public in a way that might hurt your reputation further. Or what? There was a pause. Or we could hire a private investigator, Richard said quietly. Have them look into Jennifer's finances, her background, her conduct as HOA president. See if there's anything that could be used as leverage. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, something dark. He didn't like the feeling, but it was familiar. It was the feeling of being willing to do things he normally wouldn't do, things that might not be entirely ethical because he was tired of losing. Do it, he said. Later that night, as Marcus lay in bed next to his sleeping wife, he thought about the point at which a dispute became a feud, at which people stopped being neighbors and became enemies. He tried to remember if there was a moment where he could have chosen differently, where he could have just let Jennifer use his pool or agreed to some compromise that might have prevented all of this. He couldn't find it. Every decision he'd made had been reasonable. He'd had the right to say no. He'd had the right to enforce his property boundaries. He'd had the right to push back when someone tried to manipulate him. But rights and wisdom weren't always the same thing. He fell asleep worrying that he was the one who'd started this war, even if Jennifer had fired the first shots. The private investigator's name was Marcus Salvo, which Marcus Chen found darkly funny in a detached way. Marcus S. was a thin man in his 50s with tired eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen every variation of human dishonesty. He'd run surveillance operations, located missing people, and uncovered infidelities that had destroyed marriages. This was, he assured Marcus, a relatively straightforward assignment. I'm going to look at 3 main areas, Salvo explained when they met at a coffee shop a mile away from Willowbrook Estates. Her finances, specifically how she's using her position as HOA president and whether there's any evidence of self-dealing. Her background, any history of litigation, harassment complaints, anything that suggests a pattern of behavior. And her conduct in the current situation, documented evidence of harassment, bias, or abuse of power. Marcus nodded, listening as Salvo described his methodology with the casual efficiency of someone describing a grocery list. Something in him recoiled at the coldness of it, at how easily they were reducing Jennifer's actions into categories and tactics to be investigated. But he pushed the feeling down. Jennifer hadn't shown him any mercy. Why should he show her any? Over the next 2 weeks, Salvo worked. He filed public records requests for HOA board meeting minutes, financial statements, and property records. He interviewed contractors who'd worked on homes in Willowbrook Estates. He reviewed Jennifer's social media presence, looking for patterns in her behavior. He checked court records and civil complaint databases. And then, in the 3rd week, he found something. They met again at the coffee shop. Salvo slid a file folder across the table. "This is interesting," he said. "Jennifer Hartwell was sued 3 years ago by a neighbor in her previous neighborhood. She lived in Chester Heights before moving to Willowbrook." Marcus opened the file. The lawsuit had been filed by a couple named the Ralstons. Jennifer and her family had lived 2 doors down. The Ralstons had a detached garage that bordered Jennifer's property. According to the complaint, Jennifer had claimed the garage's foundation was on her property line. It wasn't, according to the actual survey, and had used her position on that neighborhood's property association to pressure the Ralstons to either move the structure or pay her a settlement. They'd ultimately settled out of court for $15,000. "There's more," Salvo continued. "Similar situations in 2 other neighborhoods where she's lived. A dispute with a neighbor about where to plant a tree. She claimed it was on her property when it wasn't. Another situation where she convinced the HOA to fine a family for an alleged fence violation. That one actually went to arbitration, and the family won, but not before being stressed out and spending legal fees." Marcus felt something cold slide through his veins. This wasn't just about him. This was a pattern. Jennifer didn't just push boundaries with individual neighbors. She systematically used HOA power and social manipulation to get what she wanted. "There's something else," Salvo said. He pulled out a bank statement. "Her husband's business, he's a contractor, runs a development company. About 30% of the contractors he hires to work on HOA-approved projects are companies he has financial interests in or relationships with. It's hard to prove it's illegal, but it's definitely ethically questionable." "So they're making money off the HOA," Marcus said slowly. "Or more accurately, they're positioned to profit from HOA decisions and enforcement actions. If the HOA orders someone to hire an HOA-approved contractor, and Derek has relationships with those contractors, Derek profits. It's a conflict of interest at minimum." Marcus stared at the documents, processing. "Can we use this?" "Some of it, the stuff about previous neighborhoods, is public record. The pattern of behavior is going to be damaging to her reputation. The financial stuff is trickier. It's not necessarily illegal unless we can prove that she's actively favoring her husband's associates in a way that violates her fiduciary duty to the HOA." Salvo leaned back in his chair. "Here's my recommendation. Don't go after the financial stuff aggressively yet. Lead with the pattern of behavior. Show the HOA board and the neighborhood that this is someone who has a history of using her position to manipulate and intimidate neighbors. That's going to be much more effective than trying to prove financial crimes, which are complicated and might make you look like you're just trying to mudsling back." Marcus nodded slowly. "What do I do?" "You prepare a detailed written complaint to the HOA board. You present the evidence of her previous conflicts with neighbors. You make a formal request that the board investigate whether her actions in your case represent an abuse of power and a violation of her duties as president. You make it official and documented, and you do it before she can respond." "Won't she see this coming?" "Probably," Salvo said. "But there's a difference between suspecting something and having documented evidence in a formal complaint that goes on record. Once it's official, it changes the game." Marcus left the coffee shop with copies of everything Salvo had found. He called Richard and set up a meeting for the following day. Richard reviewed the materials carefully, making notes, occasionally nodding or frowning. When he was done, he looked at Marcus over his glasses. "This is good," Richard said. "This is really good. It gives us ammunition. The question is, how much do you want to use it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we can file a complaint that's designed to embarrass her and make her look bad, or we can file a complaint that's designed to get her removed from the HOA board. One is about revenge. The other is about winning. They're different strategies with different outcomes." Marcus considered this. "What's the difference practically?" "If we go for revenge, we make as much of this public as possible. We leak it to neighbors, we make sure everyone knows about her pattern of behavior, we damage her reputation as severely as we can. It feels good in the moment, but it keeps you locked in conflict. You're both damaged, and you still have to live next to each other. And if we go for winning, we file the formal complaint, we present the evidence, we focus on getting the board to acknowledge that there's been a conflict of interest or abuse of power. We push for her removal or, at minimum, a formal investigation. Once she's off the board and her power is stripped, the harassment stops. She can't enforce violations against you anymore. Her threats lose their teeth." Marcus felt the weight of the choice. Revenge felt good when you were angry, but actually winning, actually neutralizing the threat, that was smarter. "Let's go for winning," he said. Over the next week, Richard and Marcus prepared a formal complaint to the HOA board. It was carefully worded, legally airtight, and absolutely devastating in its implications. They documented the pattern of behavior in previous neighborhoods. They referenced the conflicts of interest in her husband's contracting businesses. They highlighted the suspicious sequence of events in their current situation: the pool trespassing, the response with legal action, the sudden appearance of pool maintenance violations, the social media campaign, the pressure from the board. They presented it all as a formal complaint, requesting an investigation into whether Jennifer Hartwell's conduct as HOA president violated the fiduciary duties she owed to the community. Richard filed it on a Monday morning, simultaneously sending copies to the other board members and requesting an emergency meeting to discuss the complaint. He also, strategically, made sure that a copy reached the neighborhood's social media channels through an anonymous post that included links to the court records from Jennifer's previous neighborhoods. By Monday afternoon, the tone had completely shifted. The Facebook comments that had been attacking Marcus now had a different target. People who'd been so quick to believe Jennifer's narrative about pool contamination and Marcus's racism were now discovering that she had a history of doing this. The story was rewriting itself in real time. Derek called Marcus on Monday evening, his voice strained. "What did you do?" he asked. "I filed a formal complaint," Marcus said, keeping his tone even, "based on factual information about your wife's conduct." "You're destroying her," Derek said. "Do you understand that? You're going to ruin her life." "Your wife tried to ruin mine," Marcus replied. "I was just defending myself." "By going to war." There was something in Derek's voice, not anger but a kind of broken resignation, that made Marcus pause. Derek had never been the problem. Derek had just been caught up in Jennifer's ambitions and her need to control everything and everyone around her. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I really am, but I can't let her keep doing this to me." Derek was quiet for a long moment. "She's going to make this worse," he said finally. "That's just who she is. When she's backed into a corner, she comes out fighting. You should know that before you push this any further." The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. Marcus attended, as did Richard. Jennifer showed up with her own lawyer, an expensive-looking woman in her 40s with sharp features and sharper questions. The meeting was tense and procedural. Richard presented the evidence. Jennifer's lawyer countered with technical arguments about the authority of the HOA president. The other board members, clearly uncomfortable and unsure, looked at their notes and wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. "The question before the board," Richard said in closing, "is whether the conduct outlined in this complaint represents an appropriate use of the HOA president's authority, or whether it represents a pattern of abuse that needs to be addressed. I would argue that the evidence speaks for itself." Jennifer's lawyer stood. "What this is a personal dispute between neighbors that has nothing to do with the HOA's governance. Mr. Chen is unhappy that his pool party was interrupted, and now he's trying to use the board as a weapon in a personal vendetta. That's not what this organization is for." "The pool situation is one aspect," Richard corrected. "But the pattern of behavior, using the HOA authority to target neighbors, the financial conflicts of interest, the previous disputes in other communities, these are governance issues." The board called for a vote on whether to open a formal investigation into Jennifer's conduct. It passed 3-2, with Jennifer abstaining. She wasn't removed from her position, not yet, but she was suspended from making unilateral decisions about enforcement actions while the investigation was underway. Jennifer's face, as the vote was announced, went very still. Her lawyer reached over and put a hand on her arm, but Jennifer pulled away. She stood, gathered her things, and left without saying a word. Derek followed her out a moment later. Marcus felt the weight of victory, and underneath it, something much heavier. He'd won. Jennifer had lost power. The harassment should stop now. But Derek's words echoed in his head. "She's going to make this worse. That's just who she is. When she's backed into a corner, she comes out fighting." Marcus pushed the warning away. He was tired. He'd been fighting for weeks. He deserved to rest. He didn't know that Jennifer had already decided what she was going to do next. He didn't know that being cornered was exactly when Jennifer was most dangerous. He didn't know that she had one more move left, one that would remind him that power and victory were not the same thing as safety. Jennifer didn't sleep for 2 days after the board vote. She sat in her home office, curtains drawn, moving through emotions in a pattern that Derek recognized. Anger, vindication, shame, rage, calculation, and finally, most dangerously, cold certainty. She made calls, she reached out to contacts, she did research, and by Friday evening she had a plan. It started with a report to the county animal control office. The report claimed that Derek had been keeping livestock on their residential property in violation of county codes. Specifically, a dairy cow named Bessie that was kept in their side yard, technically on Jennifer's parents' adjacent property, but in a way that violated the spirit of the zoning laws. The report was technically true, but practically irrelevant. Derek's family had a small hobby farm set up through his parents' property, a few animals, nothing serious, a holdover from when Derek's father had been more actively farming. The cow, Bessie, was elderly, well-maintained, and had been there for 3 years without anyone caring or complaining. Jennifer didn't care about the cow. The cow was a weapon, a perfectly legal weapon that came with her name and her authority as HOA president attached to it. Animal Control showed up on Saturday morning with a notice of violation and orders to remove the animal within 7 days or face fines. Derek was furious when he found out what Jennifer had done. They had a fight that could be heard from the street. Linda Chen heard it while watering her garden and texted Marcus, who was at the gym. By the time Marcus got home, Derek had packed a bag and left. Jennifer had accomplished something remarkable. She destroyed her own marriage in an attempt to rebuild her reputation. But that wasn't the end of her plan. On Sunday evening, the Willowbrook Estates Facebook group lit up with a post from Jennifer's account. "I need to confess something. I've been wrong about everything. I let my need to be liked and my need to build community push me into doing things I shouldn't have done. I violated Mr. Chen's privacy. I trespassed on his property. And then when he appropriately pushed back, I reacted badly. I'm ashamed. I'm stepping down from the HOA board effective immediately." The post continued with a detailed apology that was remarkably well written, probably because Jennifer had spent hours crafting it. She admitted to her mistakes. She expressed understanding of Marcus's desire for privacy. She acknowledged the misunderstanding about the pool maintenance issues and suggested that maybe the earlier inspection had been rushed and not as thorough as it should have been. It was a masterclass in damage control and narrative reversal. She was beating everyone to the story, getting ahead of the negative narrative by admitting to smaller sins before anyone could prove bigger ones. Within 2 hours, the neighborhood's tone had shifted again. Instead of Jennifer being the villain who'd pushed around an innocent family, she was now the person who had the courage to admit when she was wrong. The comments shifted from angry to sympathetic. "So brave to own your mistakes like that. I'm glad you see how wrong you were. The hardest thing is admitting when you're not perfect." Somehow, by being vulnerable and apologetic, Jennifer had made herself sympathetic. Marcus read the post at 10 p.m. on Sunday night, and something inside him broke. He'd gone through all of this: the legal fees, the investigation, the formal complaint, the confrontation with the board, and somehow Jennifer had found a way to transform it into her being the bigger person for admitting mistakes. He called Richard. "She just admitted to trespassing," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "She just admitted to everything we've been fighting about. Isn't that confession? Can we use that?" "We can," Richard said carefully. "But at what cost? The neighborhood's sympathy has shifted back to her. She's positioned herself as reformed and regretful. If we go after her now, we look like we're kicking someone when they're down. So she gets away with it." "She gets away with most of it," Richard said. "That's not what justice feels like, I know, but sometimes that's how these things end. Not with a clear winner and a clear loser, but with everyone exhausted and ready to move on." Marcus hung up the phone without responding. Linda found him on the back patio, sitting in the dark, staring at the pool that had started everything. The pool that now felt like the most expensive mistake he'd ever made, not because of its cost, but because of what it had cost him. "She won," Marcus said quietly. "I can't believe it, but she won." "What do you mean?" Linda asked, sitting down next to him. "I mean that I did everything right. I got evidence. I filed a formal complaint. I built a case. And she just made a Facebook post admitting she was wrong, and somehow that's better than me winning. Everyone's going to think I'm the asshole if I keep pushing. Then don't keep pushing, Linda said gently. If I don't, she gets away with it. Does she? Linda asked. She's gone from the HOA board. Her family situation is a disaster. Derek left her. Her neighborhood reputation is still damaged. She won tactically, maybe, but she didn't actually win. Her life is pretty messed up. Marcus wanted to take comfort in that, but he couldn't. Partly because he didn't believe it, and partly because even if it were true, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like a loss by another name. What Marcus didn't know was that the next phase was already in motion. What he didn't understand yet was that Jennifer, stripped of her official power and her marriage, had decided to do something that fell outside the bounds of legality. She hired someone. She didn't do the research through normal channels. She went to a friend of a friend who knew someone who knew someone. That particular chain of connections that leads to people who do things that shouldn't be traced back to their employers. She hired a man to follow Marcus, to photograph him, to document his daily life. She was going to get leverage. She was going to find something, anything, that could be used against him. Because Jennifer's core belief, the thing that had driven all of her actions, was that everyone was corrupt in some way. Everyone had secrets. Everyone cut corners. Everyone was lying about something, and if you looked hard enough, you could find it. It took 3 weeks of surveillance before the man Jennifer hired found what he was looking for. Marcus had a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he left work early and went to a coffee shop about 15 miles from his home. He'd stay for about an hour. Then he'd leave and drive to a small office building on the other side of town, where he'd stay for approximately 90 minutes. Then he'd go home. The surveillance man reported back to Jennifer that Mr. Chen was having an affair. The coffee shop visits were probably meetings with his mistress. The office building visits were probably meetings with her again. It was a textbook affair pattern. Jennifer had what she wanted. She had leverage. She had something that would hurt Marcus in a way that all his legal victories couldn't prevent. She scheduled a meeting with Marcus. It was done through a text from a blocked number. "We need to talk. Coffee shop on 8th Street. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Come alone. J." Marcus should have ignored it. He should have blocked the number. Instead, he went. Jennifer was waiting at a corner table, a cup of coffee in front of her that she didn't touch. She looked small somehow, thinner than he remembered. There was something fragile about her, something that made Marcus realize that this whole situation had worn on her as much as it had worn on him. "I need you to drop the complaint," Jennifer said without preamble. "And I need you to tell people that we worked it out, that there was a misunderstanding on both sides." "No," Marcus said. "I'm not asking," Jennifer said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed him photographs. Marcus at the coffee shop. Marcus at the office building. Photographs that looked, to an untrained eye, exactly like what Jennifer was implying they were. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Who is that?" Jennifer asked. "Your therapist, your accountant, or someone else?" "You know you can see people's business names," Marcus said slowly, "when you look at the directory for that office building." "I do," Jennifer said, "but the neighborhood doesn't. The neighborhood sees a man sneaking away from his wife twice a week to an anonymous building. The neighborhood sees photographs that suggest an affair." Marcus felt something clarify inside him. This was Jennifer at her core. This was what she did when she had no power. She created narratives. She took ambiguous information and bent it into stories that served her purposes. "You're not going to do this," Marcus said. "I'm not." Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "Why? Because you think no one will believe me. I have photographs. I have documentation of a pattern. All I have to do is share these with Linda. Or post them on Facebook with some cryptic captions about wondering what people are doing on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You think that won't destroy your marriage?" "Probably," Marcus said. "But Linda will also ask who took the photographs and why, and the answer to that question will make it very clear that you're harassing me, which is illegal." Jennifer's face hardened. "I have nothing to lose," she said. "My marriage is already over. My reputation is already destroyed. I might as well burn everything down." "That's not true," Marcus said, and he meant it. "You have a choice. You can keep digging the hole you're in, or you can step out of it." "Like you did?" Jennifer asked bitterly. "Like you stepped back when you could have. No, I'm not like you. I don't know how to lose gracefully." She stood to leave, the phone still in her hand. If you send those photographs to anyone, Marcus said, his voice very quiet and very steady, I will file a police report for harassment and stalking. I will press charges. I will pursue every legal avenue available to me. And I will win. Not because I'm right at this point, who even knows who's right anymore, but because I can afford the lawyers and you can't. That's the only leverage that actually matters. Jennifer stared at him. For a moment, Marcus saw something break in her expression. A recognition, perhaps, that she was overmatched, that she'd pushed too far, that this was the end of the road. She put the phone away without another word and left the coffee shop. Marcus sat alone at the table for a long time, drinking cold coffee, thinking about how two people could start with something as simple as a neighbor asking to use a pool and end up here, in mutual destruction, in betrayal, in the kind of escalation that had no winners. He didn't know it yet, but that meeting in the coffee shop was the beginning of the end. Not the resolution, but the beginning of something that would cascade beyond both of their control. Because someone had seen the meeting, someone had taken note of the conversation that had looked, to an observer, like something serious and possibly threatening. And that person had opinions about what should happen next. The next morning, Derek called Marcus. They hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since the board meeting where Derek had warned him about Jennifer's tendency to escalate. We need to meet, Derek said without preamble, but not at anyone's house, somewhere neutral. They met at a park, at a picnic table away from the main pathways where no one would think to look. Derek looked like he hadn't slept. He wore the expression of someone carrying information he didn't want to carry. Jennifer has moved out, Derek said. She's staying with her mother in Chester Heights. She's talking about filing for divorce. She's also threatening to do something. I don't know exactly what. She's been talking to lawyers, and I think it's worse than what she tried with you. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, Derek said carefully, that I think she's going to try to prove that you and I are, that there's something going on, something inappropriate, something that would explain why we were meeting secretly. Marcus felt ice in his veins. That's insane. Why would she? Because you're a man, I'm a man. You met twice to discuss things in private. In a certain narrative, that becomes evidence of collusion or something worse. And if she can make that narrative stick, it destroys both of you. It makes you look like you're hiding something. It makes me look like I've betrayed her. She's going to accuse us of having an affair, Marcus asked incredulously. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Is it? Derek asked. You did hire a private investigator. You did dig up dirt on her. You did orchestrate a formal complaint against her. You did publicly humiliate her at the HOA board. What would the narrative be? That you and I were colluding against her. That I was helping you with your complaints against the HOA in exchange for. What? That's where the story gets ugly. Marcus stood up from the table. This is crazy. This is legally insane. No one would believe. Everyone would believe it, Derek interrupted, standing as well. Because you've already shown you're willing to escalate, because she's already shown she's willing to tell lies, and because once a story like that is out there, it doesn't matter if it's true. The damage is done. So what? Marcus asked. What am I supposed to do? I think you need to leave, Derek said quietly. I think you need to sell your house and move away from here, because if you stay, this is going to keep escalating. She's going to keep finding new ways to attack you, and each attack is going to make you look worse than the last one. That's letting her win, Marcus said. No, Derek said. Winning is surviving. Winning is getting out before the fire spreads. Because this thing between you and Jennifer, it's a fire, and it's going to burn down everything it touches. Marcus didn't want to believe him. He wanted to believe that reason and law and truth could prevail. But looking at Derek's face, the exhaustion, the defeat, the resignation, he realized Derek had already come to terms with a loss that Marcus was still denying. Derek left, and Marcus sat alone at the picnic table, watching joggers pass by, watching people live their normal lives while his was quietly unraveling. That afternoon, Marcus called Richard. What Derek said about the accusation, Marcus began. Probably won't stick, Richard said. But she can make the accusation, she can make it public, and then we spend months defending you against something that's completely absurd. At a certain point, the cost of defense exceeds the benefit of fighting. So I should just leave. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should consider what you're fighting for. Is it justice? Is it winning? Is it making sure Jennifer gets what she deserves? Because justice is expensive, winning is exhausting, and making sure someone else gets punished rarely makes the victim feel better. Marcus hung up and went to find Linda. She was in the garden, which had been her refuge this whole summer. She'd stopped going to neighborhood events. She'd stopped trying to be friendly with people who'd sided against them. She'd just been tending her garden and waiting for this to end. "Would you want to move?" Marcus asked her. Linda looked up from the tomato plants she was pruning. "Yes," she said simply. "I want to leave this neighborhood. I want to leave this state if we can. I want to be somewhere that this never happened." Something broke inside Marcus. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we'll move." He called a real estate agent the next day. The house went on the market on Friday. By the following Wednesday, they had an offer. It wasn't a great offer. The asking price had to be reduced because of the reputation issues in the neighborhood, which was real estate speak for everyone knows something weird happened here. But it was enough. It was enough to break even and have a little left over. The news that the Chen family was leaving spread through Willowbrook Estates like they'd been waiting for it. It became confirmation of guilt, somehow, as if leaving was an admission that Marcus had done something wrong. Jennifer found out about the sale from her lawyer, who'd been monitoring Marcus's property records. She called Marcus one final time. "You're running away," she said when he answered. "Yes," Marcus said. He was done lying, done hiding, done trying to make sense of a situation that had become senseless. "I'm running away. From you, from this neighborhood, from all of it." "Because you're guilty," Jennifer said. "Because deep down you know you're the villain in this story." "I'm not the villain," Marcus said quietly. "But I'm also not going to spend the next year of my life in court defending myself against accusations that are designed to hurt me rather than heal you. There are no heroes in this story, Jennifer. There's just two people who couldn't figure out how to be neighbors." He hung up before she could respond. 2 weeks later, the Chen family was gone. The real estate sign came down from their driveway on a Saturday morning. The new owners, a young family from out of state, moved in 4 weeks later. They seemed nice. They seemed normal. They seemed completely unaware of the history embedded in the walls of the house they'd just bought. Jennifer watched it all happen from her mother's house in Chester Heights, where she'd moved permanently. The divorce with Derek was finalized 2 months later. He got the house. She got the settlement and a restraining order that prevented her from contacting anyone in Willowbrook Estates with the intent to cause harm, something the judge had put in place after reading the details of her surveillance of Marcus. The HOA board eventually concluded their investigation into Jennifer's conduct. They found no evidence of financial impropriety, but they did find a pattern of aggressive enforcement and questionable judgment calls. The board voted to amend the bylaws to prevent any future president from having such wide latitude in enforcement actions. The new HOA president was Derek's friend Tom Bradshaw, a middle manager at an insurance company who had absolutely no ambition to do anything controversial or memorable. Life in Willowbrook Estates returned to normal. The story faded. New gossip replaced it. Within a year, most people in the neighborhood couldn't remember the details of what had happened between Marcus Chen and Jennifer Hartwell. They just knew it had ended badly. And then, 6 months after Marcus had moved, something unexpected happened. Jennifer was arrested. The charge was harassment, based on the surveillance she'd commissioned. But the real issue was that she'd been contacted by an undercover police officer who claimed to want the private investigator's services for purposes that were decidedly illegal. Rather than walk away, Jennifer had pursued the contact, thinking it was the kind of leverage she needed to restart her war with Marcus. It was a sting operation. She went to trial. She was found guilty. The verdict was delivered on a Tuesday. Marcus read about it in the news. Jennifer received a sentence of probation and anger management classes, but the guilt was on the record. The conviction was on the record. She'd finally gotten exactly what she deserved. Not redemption, not revenge, but consequences. Marcus thought, when he read the article, that he should feel satisfied. He thought he should feel vindicated. He thought he should feel like this was finally justice. Instead, he just felt tired. He was sitting on the porch of his new house, in a new town, in a new state, with a view of mountains he'd never seen before, and he couldn't even summon the energy to feel good about Jennifer's downfall. Maybe Derek had been right. Maybe the real victory was just surviving and getting out. Linda came out with 2 cups of tea. "Did you see?" she asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I saw." "Do you feel better?" she asked, sitting next to him. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "Do you?" "A little," Linda admitted. "But also, I feel bad for her, which is weird. I shouldn't feel bad for her." "She made her choices," Marcus said. "She did, but they destroyed her. Her marriage is over. Her reputation is destroyed. She has a criminal record. And why? Because she couldn't handle that a neighbor said no to something she wanted." They sat in silence, watching the mountains. "Do you think we handled it right?" Linda asked. "No," Marcus said. "I think we escalated. I think I escalated. I had opportunities to be bigger about it, to be more generous, to just let it go, and I didn't. I pushed back, and she pushed back harder, and it became this thing that neither of us could control." "You were defending yourself," Linda said. "I know, but defending yourself and being wise about how you defend yourself, those are different things." 8 months after the Chens moved away, Marcus received a certified letter at his new address. It was from a law firm in the state where he'd moved. He opened it with dread, thinking it was some kind of follow-up to the Jennifer situation, some legal remnant he thought he'd escaped. It wasn't. The letter was from Derek's lawyer. Derek was suing Marcus for damages related to the divorce proceedings. Specifically, he was claiming that Marcus's actions in filing the complaint against Jennifer had precipitated the breakdown of his marriage, and that Marcus bore partial responsibility for the financial and emotional damages that Derek had incurred as a result. Marcus read it 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding it. The suit claimed that by orchestrating the investigation into Jennifer and filing the formal complaint, Marcus had deliberately damaged Jennifer's reputation in a way that had humiliated Derek and made his marriage untenable. It further claimed that Marcus had known this would cause Derek financial harm, specifically through the necessity of hearing expensive divorce lawyers, which he wouldn't have needed if Marcus hadn't escalated the situation. The amount Derek was seeking was $40,000. Marcus called Richard immediately. Richard was now managing his cases remotely from a different state, but he was still his lawyer. "This is weak," Richard said after reviewing the suit. "This is Derek grasping at straws. He's angry about his divorce, and he's trying to make you responsible for it." "Can he win?" Marcus asked. "No," Richard said. "You didn't cause Derek's divorce. Jennifer caused Derek's divorce. She did that by escalating a neighborhood dispute to the point where Derek couldn't stay in the marriage. Derek has to take responsibility for his own choices." "So we'll win." "We'll probably win," Richard said. "But we still have to defend the suit, and that's going to cost money, probably $15,000 in legal fees to make this go away." Marcus felt something inside him crack again. It never ended. No matter what happened, there were always consequences. There was always someone coming at him with something else. He talked it over with Linda that night. "We could settle," she suggested. "Just pay him something to make it go away." "That would be admitting fault," Marcus said. "So?" Marcus didn't have a good answer. What was the point of fighting anymore? What was the point of being right if the cost of being right was constant? He decided to settle. He called Derek's lawyer and offered $20,000 to make the suit go away. Derek accepted immediately. The money transferred. The suit was dismissed. It was done. But it wasn't the end of the story, not quite. 3 weeks after the suit was settled, Marcus received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was simply truth. He almost deleted it without reading, but something made him open it. The email was from Sophie Hartwell, Jennifer's 14-year-old daughter. She was now 16 in high school, and she decided that she needed to tell Marcus something. The email read, "Mr. Chen, I'm writing this to you because I think you deserve to know the truth about what happened with my parents. I'm not writing this with my mom's permission or knowledge. In fact, I think she would be angry if she knew I was doing this. First, I want to apologize for showing up at your pool and being disrespectful. I was a kid. I didn't understand what the big deal was about sharing a pool with neighbors. But I get it now. It was your property. You had a right to say no. What I want to tell you is about my parents' marriage. It wasn't great to begin with. My dad wasn't happy. He spent a lot of time away from home. He and my mom fought a lot. Their problems started long before you and my mom had the pool argument. When my mom got upset about your pool, I think it was actually about something else. I think the pool was just an excuse for her to fight with someone. I think she was unhappy with her life and she was looking for something to blame. My dad tried to get her to stop. He told her to leave you alone, but she wouldn't listen. And then when you pushed back, instead of accepting that she was wrong, she just pushed harder. And my dad couldn't handle being married to someone who was like that. Someone who couldn't admit fault. Someone who had to win every argument. So he left, and my mom blames you. But the truth is, my mom did that. My mom destroyed her own marriage by refusing to be reasonable. I'm telling you this because I know you left town thinking you were the bad guy. I know the neighborhood probably made you feel like you were the villain. But you weren't. You were just someone who wanted privacy on your own property. My mom was the one who escalated things. My mom was the one who couldn't let it go. I don't know if this helps. I don't know if it makes any difference. But I wanted you to know that you weren't wrong. You were just dealing with someone who couldn't handle rejection. I also want you to know that my mom is in therapy now. It's court-ordered as part of her probation, but she's actually going and actually engaging with it. I think she's starting to understand that she has a pattern of behavior that hurts the people around her. I'm not writing this to defend her. I'm writing this to give you closure, to tell you that it wasn't your fault. Sophie Hartwell. Marcus read the email 5 times. Each time he felt something shift inside him, something that had been wound tight for a year beginning to loosen. He wrote back, "Dear Sophie, thank you for writing to me. That took courage and I appreciate it. I want you to know that I don't blame you or Derek for any of this. I blame myself partly for not being more patient, for escalating when I could have been more diplomatic. But mostly I've learned that blame is a limited framework for understanding what happened between your mother and me. We both made choices. Some of those choices were good. Some of them weren't. The problem wasn't that one of us was good and one of us was bad. The problem was that we both became defensive, and that defensiveness led to escalation. I wish your parents' marriage had worked out. I wish none of this had happened. But I'm also grateful that you took the time to write this to me because it helps me understand that I can move forward without carrying anger. That's a gift. I hope things get better for you and your family. Marcus Chen." He sent the email and then sat with the silence for a long time. Linda found him on the porch again, as she always did when he needed to think. "What was the email?" she asked. Marcus told her. "That's good," Linda said. "That's closure." "Is it?" Marcus asked. "Or is it just more of the same, people telling me stories about what happened, trying to reshape the narrative into something that makes sense?" "Maybe," Linda said. "But sometimes that's what closure is. Sometimes it's not truth. Sometimes it's just the end of a story that lets you stop reading." Marcus nodded slowly. He thought about the past year, about the pool, about Jennifer, about Derek, about the escalating cycle of action and reaction that had consumed so much of his life. He thought about the question that Derek had asked him in that first warning. Did you want to burn down the neighborhood to make a point? The answer ultimately was no. He hadn't wanted that. He just wanted his privacy. He just wanted to say no to something and have that no be respected. But wanting something and protecting it were different things, and the protection had cost more than the thing was worth. The Henderson family, the ones who'd bought the Chen house in Willowbrook Estates, had been in the neighborhood for a year when they received a visit from Jennifer Hartwell. Jennifer had moved back to Willowbrook after her probation ended. Derek had custody of the house they'd owned together, but he'd sold it and moved to another state entirely. Jennifer had moved into a small rental a few blocks away, starting over from almost nothing. She brought the Hendersons a casserole and apologized for the neighborhood's energy. She told them that there had been a recent conflict that might have given the area a bad reputation, but it was over now. The Hendersons were friendly but cautious. They'd heard rumors from other people in the neighborhood. They didn't know who Jennifer was or what had happened, but they sensed that she wasn't quite what she appeared to be. Jennifer didn't push. She just left the casserole, smiled, and went home. In therapy, her therapist asked her about the motivation behind the visit. "I think I wanted to see the house again," Jennifer said. "I wanted to see it inhabited by normal people living normal lives. I think I wanted to know that what happened there didn't permanently damage it." "Did it?" her therapist asked. "No," Jennifer said. "It didn't. There are new people living there. They have their own stories. They don't care about mine." "How does that make you feel?" Jennifer thought about this carefully. "It makes me feel like maybe the things I did, the way I behaved, Maybe none of it mattered as much as I thought it did. Maybe I wasn't as important as I thought I was. Maybe the neighborhood didn't revolve around me and my disputes the way I believed it did. "Is that a good feeling?" her therapist asked. "No," Jennifer said. "It's actually a terrible feeling, but it's also honest." Marcus, in his new town, received word of all this through the neighborhood Facebook group. He'd remained in it despite moving, just to see what happened. When he saw a post about the original HOA president visiting and people mentioning how much better things were now that certain drama had ended, he smiled. Not a smile of satisfaction, just a smile of recognition. A smile that meant he understood that this was over. That Jennifer would likely live in that neighborhood for the rest of her life, always carrying the weight of what had happened, always aware that people knew. And he would live here, free of that weight, free of her, free of the entire situation. One evening, he stood on his porch and thought about the fact that if Jennifer had just accepted his first no about the pool, none of this would have happened. If she'd respected his boundary, they would still be neighbors in Willowbrook Estates, probably never becoming friends, but at least not enemies. The simple act of acceptance, accepting that someone would say no to her, that she couldn't control every situation, that not everyone would bend to her will. That single act of acceptance would have prevented an entire year of conflict. But Jennifer couldn't accept it, and Marcus couldn't let it go, and between the two of them, they'd created a perfect storm. He thought about Derek, somewhere in another state, probably trying to rebuild his life after a marriage destroyed by a woman who couldn't admit fault. He thought about Sophie, forced to watch her family implode and then deciding in the aftermath to tell the truth about it. He thought about the rest of the neighborhood, people who'd believed lies, sided against him, participated in a narrative that wasn't true, and then had to come to terms with the fact that they'd gotten it wrong. And finally, he thought about Jennifer, living alone in a small house in a neighborhood where everyone knew her story, carrying that weight every single day. That perhaps was the real consequence, not legal judgment or financial settlements or public humiliation, just the daily weight of knowing that you'd created this situation, that you'd pushed it until it broke, that you'd hurt people, damaged your own marriage, and hurt your own children in the process. That was the thing about escalation. Nobody really won. Everyone just got progressively more damaged until someone finally had to walk away. Marcus looked out at the mountains that had nothing to do with any of this, that existed in beautiful indifference to human drama.